today we're going to talk about how to know when to start your seeds so that you'll have blooms all season long.
Welcome to Learn Cut Flower Growing. Whether you are an inspiring green thumb, a busy mompreneur, or simply seeking a passion, you are in the right place. If I had to do it all over again, knowing what I know now, I would do it smarter. And that's what I'm sharing here. I want to take years off your learning and help you bloom with confidence in your garden. Each episode, I'll share practical tips and ideas, heartfelt stories, and expert insights to help you grow and find balance in your journey. I'm Paula Rice, your cut flower farmer guide. I've been growing for 16 years, and I'm an expert in my field, literally. So grab your gardening gloves and listen to me while you work, or grab a cup of coffee and relax as you learn to manage a cut flower garden and business.
I did it my entire career of growing. I would walk into the week and kind of always have a little knot in my stomach, hoping that, will I have enough flowers? What's going to be blooming next week? Did I plant a solid seeding schedule so that next week, the next thing that comes into bloom is ready on time? So when you're building that up, it's actually your seeding schedule, your planting schedule, all of that. And so we're going to visit that today on what you need to think about when you are planting your seeds and your plants. Now, there's two things that determine when you're going to start your seeds for this succession planting. And the first one is simply to know that when it comes to the calendar, when you're dealing in the agricultural world, you actually are dealing with week numbers. So the first week of January is the first week of the year. The second week of January is the second week of the year. When you move into March, okay, or February, let's see, we've got February here. Let's go March. Well, like the last week of April is the 18th week of the year. And in the agricultural world, if you're ordering plugs or anything like that, lily bulbs, they'll ask, well, what week do you want that delivered? Well, if I say the 18th week, that means it's going to be the last week of April. So first of all, you need to know that. And I renumber my calendars based on the week number. And then I base my seeding schedule on that. So when I go out to seed my flowers, I can say, what things am I seeding on week 5? What things am I seeding on week 6? And that's how my seeding schedule can be arranged. I do my seeding schedule inside of Excel because I love to sift and sort different different columns based on what information I need. So if I want to just see things alphabetically, great. If I want to see things, all the annuals that I grow, I want to see that because that will be my seed order. I can sort all of that information in Excel and pull a seeding schedule. And what's cool about that is that you can add columns and then you will be able to see, the snapdragons that I seeded on week 10 actually come into bloom week number X, which is in July. And you're going to be able to build an amazing history of based on when something is seeded and how you grow it, whether it's in a hoop house or outside, and when it blooms, you're going to start to build a history of what you have blooming when, based on when you seeded it. Okay, so that's pretty exciting to know that if you think about this enough in the future, you can match that bloom time with your seeding time and really gain a history of what your farm produces and when. Okay, so the first thing we're going to deal with when we talk about this is we're going to think about two major dates, target dates. We're going to talk about two major target dates of when you are going to plant your flowers, your little plants outside. And the first one is your last frost, okay? You want to think about, well, when the end of spring, beginning of summer comes, when do I stop freezing? Because we all know the freezing is what's going to kill your little baby plants unless you can keep them protected, unless you can keep them in a greenhouse where they wouldn't freeze, okay? So for me, that's May 20th. I just kind of go with roughly May 20th is my last frost date. And that means that for anything that I am seeding or planting out, it's heat loving. The soil will be warmed up to a certain temperature. There's no danger of frost anymore. And I can plant my heat loving plants outside. Zinnias, cosmos, anything that, man, if they get nipped at all, they're not happy. The second date you can think about is much earlier than the last frost date. And I would say it can be 4 weeks before. And this is where you're probably still getting some light frosts and you are planting things out that are cool flowers. Okay. They can take a little bit of coldness, a little bit of frost, not really. I shouldn't say they can, but they really actually can. You're going to plant them out and you're going to give them some protection. You're going to use some frost cloth to protect them. And this is a lovely strategy because it can be a lot to get all of the plants planted when you are just going off of that last frost date. Plus, there's strategy you need here. You want to be one of the first people to market with flowers. So you really are going to start playing the game. Okay, how much sooner can I make this bloom? What can I do to make it bloom sooner? So if you are using heat-loving strategy last frost date, and then, okay, these flowers are cool, they can take it a little bit cooler, and you're planting 4 weeks before that, you have 2 target planting dates, okay? I don't want to confuse you, but if you added in a hoop house, then you would have 3 target planting dates. I have the hoop house. I have the things that I can plant outside in April and cover and protect. And then I have the things that are heat loving that I plant in May that I can cover and protect. That being said, I fudge. I will plant a couple weeks even prior to that because I know I am covering it with frost cloth and that will protect it. So those heat loving plants that my last target frost date is May 20th. I actually am going to plant them outside at the beginning of May because I'm using a heavy duty row cloth cover to protect them. And that's pretty successful. So I also want to say from my experience, and I shouldn't say this out loud, but I'm just going to because I have noticed when you have plugs in the spring and you've kind of toughened them up and you go to plant them wherever they're going to go get planted, they're tougher than you think. They actually can take a bit of frost. And I don't say I'm saying this, but here I am saying this. Literally, I have gone outside and it is freezing. There's frost everywhere. And the ground is tick, 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 frozen a little bit. And the caterpillar tunnel, the plastic, it was a windy night. And the plastic had come off. And of course, that had blown off the shade or the row cover too, the protection. And I touched the ground and I'm like, and those little plants live. The cool loving, there's no way a zinnia would have loved that at all, even as a tiny baby. But the cool flowers can actually take it. In fact, in the beginning of my growing, I would go into my greenhouses like every morning. I was kind of obsessive of like, are the heaters keeping up? Because when you start to grow flowers in the north, we're at 15 degrees outside. And here it is at the beginning of March. Anything can happen. And I don't have the most awesome heaters out there that can just power through that. At a certain point, the cold is going to take over. And so I would go out there and I've got a thermometer in my greenhouse and I'm watching it. I'm like, oh, here's the temperature outside and here's what it's saying in here. And I'm kind of logging that information so that I know how far I can push things. I know when I need to bring in support, like get in the propane heaters or the big gas heaters and bring them in because the electric isn't doing it or all of that jazz. So I'm always watching that, but literally inside of my greenhouse, the temperature is reading like 30 degrees and I'm touching the little seedlings, cool loving. Please remember that. Cool loving. And I'm like, oof, that little cell is kind of like tink, tink, tink. It's a little frozen and they can take it. Okay. So that being said, I didn't say any of that. Just play the game that you're deathly afraid of frost. Okay. With your cool loving plants. So we have those 2 target dates. And then from those 2 dates, we're going to plant our seeds. Start our seeds in, for me, it's in a studio. If you start your seeds in the greenhouse, great. So if I know in my mind, and I actually have several target dates, I actually have several seeding schedules for different target dates, but we're going to start with these 3. So if I am like, okay, my last frost date is May 20th, But you and I both know that I just told you I'm totally going to push that limit and actually call it May 5th. Okay. May 5th is literally when I'm going to count back. So the seed packet says, start this seed 6 to 8 weeks before you plan to plant it out. Okay. So I'm planning to plant that out May 5th. And so I'm going to count back from that date. And that is a seeding schedule. Basically, it's a seeding schedule for the target planting date of May 5th. Okay. So if I have another planting target date of April 15th, then I am counting back those seed packets. And because I know that those plants are going outside, they need to be cool loving. And so I'm looking at my seeds, and they're just all the types of plants that can take a little bit of coolness. And I am planting back from April 15th or April 20th, and I'm counting back like 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and starting that seed in my studio. And I'm also planning to kind of toughen up the plants for a few days before I actually plant them where they go. Okay. The third seeding schedule that I have is for the hoop house. So if I'm planting to plant up the hoop house the middle of March, okay, that's my target planting date. And so I'm going to create a seeding schedule for the hoop house and count back from that date. So that is the strategy involved with that. You are going to be planting, like when you have your seeding schedule, you're actually going to be planting, like, let's go with sunflowers, okay? Let's say, okay, I want some sunflowers in the hoop house. So I've planned that out. For me, that's just 4 weeks before my target planting date. And then I'm going to plant some in the field for April. And so from my target planting date, I will seed 4 weeks prior to that for the April 15th planting, and then I'm going to have the May planting, and then I'm going to just go boom, 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 boom. So, I mean, when I start sunflowers for that hoop house, basically I can start them like every 2 or 3 weeks and just keep going. And then you'll figure out when the last seeding, let's say you started sunflowers, your last batch of sunflowers at the end of June. By that time, I've already flipped. I'm not actually doing them in cells anymore. I'm not making plugs. I'm direct seeding into the ground out in the field. But I will stop doing that at the end of June because they just aren't going to mature and bloom for me. Even if I am using a short, like maturity, a sunflower seed that has a short maturity date, 55 days, literally. If you plant seeds outside, direct seed them, and it's 55 days until they bloom, it is not. Okay. That is under perfect planting conditions, perfect temperature conditions is when that would happen. That would be a controlled environment, and the outdoors is not controlled. So, you can use it, but don't count on it. It's not going to be exactly right. So that's kind of how you succession plant so that you have lots of flowers all season long. And I actually have probably 6 different seeding schedules that I use. And then there's just one little sheet where it's like, okay, I'm just going to totally plant you sunflowers every 2 weeks. And then Godetia, I might try to do a little bit of Godetia in the greenhouse, and then I'll do some Godetia in the field. My Godetia in the field is always short. Okay, it's just always short. That's why I try to grow it in the greenhouse. But it is day length sensitive. So what makes that bloom is just when the amount of daylight is correct. Okay, that's what triggers that to bloom. So pretty much Godetia for me is June. Okay, we're on the longest days of the year, the shortest nights of the year, and that's what initiates bloom for Godetia. Same with asters. Like, I wouldn't try to get asters to bloom early in the season at all. They are going to be triggered by the amount of daylight in the fall. Okay, that's when they are going to do their thing. Godetia, you're not really going to get decent Godetia at the end of the season. I think if you planted a seed and you tortured it to death and it was trying to bloom when the days were getting shorter, it would do something, but it would be pathetic. So you just have to know that some seeds, some flowers are day length sensitive, and that's what makes them bloom, is the time of year that it is, the amount of daylight that they get outside. So you're dealing with all of that. And when you do that, when you do the seeding and you think, okay, I need to come back and get some scabiosa, maybe in another 3 weeks or 4 weeks, I would do another batch of scabiosa. Those are the things that are going to help you have blossoms all year long. Your main flowers, like your peonies, you're not getting those all year long. That's super seasonal, okay? Lilies, you could totally do some in the hoop house. You could do some in the field. And then, of course, because lilies are a perennial, which is totally lovely, you'll get, not only do you buy the bulb and plant it and make money on that, if you don't take the entire stalk, it will die back and it comes back again. You end up having a lily field, which is so lovely. And they bloom typically, like if you have your Asiatics, for me, they bloom at a certain time, beginning of July. And then if you have your Orientals, they typically take longer to come into bloom, and they're going to be in August. So if I plant those straight in the ground and I'm not manipulating them at all, that works into my succession. Okay, that's what you need to know. Now, if I'm going to plant it in crates and put it in the hoop house, then I'm going to plant more in crates and keep it in the cooler and then bring it out a little bit later. And you start playing that game of, succession planting lilies. That's great. You can also have them delivered to you at certain times, and that will give you succession for lilies if the company just ships them out to you every 2 weeks and you're planting in your field every 2 weeks. But the next year, they are all coming on at the same time, which is kind of fun to have like a cash crop and really just say Lily Days, then you put on your marketing hat and you're like, okay, let's get these lilies sold. And that's kind of fun. That's a good energetic thing to do. And then your sunflowers, you can just keep having them come. Dahlias, you do everything you can to get them as early as you can. And then the early dahlias are kind of crap. They're not great cut flowers for a little while, and they tend to have lots of problems. But then they move into their season, and then you have dahlias all season long. So how do I know to start a seeding schedule? When do I know what to plant? How often, so that I have flowers all season long? Well, you're going to think first about those target dates for planting outside, and you'll count back. And then you're going to watch the season. You're just going to say, oh my goodness, I didn't have enough scabiosa, or, oh, that scabiosa went for this long. And so then I need to make sure next year to plant a succession planting, 2 or 3 plantings, or maybe they last really good for you and you cut them back and they just kind of keep producing, and you wouldn't want to plant too many. You don't want to plant more than what you can actually take care of and make more work for yourself. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So that's how that starts. I want to do a shout out here, you guys. I talked about cool flowers, but really the gal who brought years ago back in the association, nobody was really talking like this. I remember going to conferences, talking to people who'd been growing for a while. Chaz Gill was an amazing grower. He was a northern grower, and he's like, yeah, I don't even start any seeds until March. Later on, this woman named Lisa Ziegler, she's an amazing grower. She's a good grower, a good human being. I really like her. She came out with the book, Cool Flowers. And you need to read that book. That blew my mind because I'd worked so hard on getting a seeding schedule set up, and it was solid. I was like, oh, okay, here we go. But when her book, Cool Flowers, came out, I was like, of course. Oh my gosh, my eyes have been seeing this, but she put words to it and wrote it in a book, and it made me see all of my flowers as heat loving, cool loving. And then I was forced to push the limits. Okay, I'm not dealing with just this last frost date or a couple weeks before, and I'm covering and protecting everything so I can trick Mother Nature. She challenged me almost, believe me, 4 to 6 weeks prior with the cool flowers, which was just amazing and lovely. I hated the fact that I had to rework my schedules a little bit, but it wasn't a big deal because I absolutely was still going to plant them on the time that I was planting them. But now I could actually think about earlier target plant out dates because these guys can take it, and they can take it. I, living up in the north, I get so jealous of the south because they're actually planting their cool flowers in the fall. And I can't do that. I have tried everything to do that. Like, oh, I'm going to put 6 inches of mulch on this. I'm going to cover it on top of that. And I can't. The best I can do is probably plant the seed in the ground and give it some protection. And then it kind of just naturally sprouts up when it normally would. Kind of like if you had a flower garden and a plant had dropped a bunch of seed everywhere. And then next year, like, oh, look at all these fun little volunteers. That's kind of what I get to do. Unless, like, I can't do it with your annuals at all. I can't do it with snapdragons, but I could do it with poppies. If it's a perennial that is first year flowering, I could do that. I could plant that plant in the fall, let it get roots. It would die back, and in the spring I could go out and cover it early, and it would start to grow and be lovely for me. And I need to be better about doing that. I have to tell you, with just the grocery, because I was running grocery and stuff like that, I have to say by the time the end of the season came, I was like, oh my goodness, it's 6 weeks. I have 6 more weeks to go. And so I didn't really want to add on the work of, okay, let's prep this field and get these perennials planted for growth next year, because I have a pretty solid flower schedule that really, really works. Like, I've got the peonies, I've got the tulips, I've got the peonies, I've got all and then the sunflowers. I have a schedule to feed the grocery store, and that worked just fine. Now that I'm going smaller and won't be doing that anymore, I think I will. I think I'll be like, yeah, it's August, let's get these perennials. I'll seed some early. Well, I'll seed some maybe in July, get some plants going, get them planted out maybe at the beginning of September, and have them as part of my new lineup. There's so much strategy in this. It's really exciting. Every time I come to do this podcast, you guys, I seriously, on these notes, I have 6 more things that I wanted to talk to you about. This is nuts. There is just so much to talk about. So just keep tuning in, because I think that you're always going to get a nugget of information, and you're going to be like, aha, yes, I can do that too, especially once you start planting flowers. So, and if you're just starting, dive into my Cut and Come Again flowers list. That is, I believe, in episode 3. That freebie is really going to help you start growing flowers, and it's going to be super simple, especially, and that is so excellent to do with your children even. So there we go, you guys. That is what you need to be thinking about right now as you start your seeds. God bless all of you. God bless your land. I am trying to really come up with this whole outro where I'm like, hey, I have this amazing thing that I say to you, like, keep flowering on. I haven't settled on it yet, but one of these days I will have that ready to go. Please follow us. That's going to help our algorithm and all of that. And then I can keep popping in here and giving you guys tips, tricks, and ideas to grow a successful flower business. And if you don't want to grow a successful flower business, then you are going to grow a successful cut flower garden. You guys have a great week, and we will see you next week.